Within the last 6 months, I've actually seen quite a few movie re-releases. These have included Lion King, The Matrix, and other great films. My friend and I have been planning to see this one picture that I'd never heard of before, titled Lawrence of Arabia. On the Fathom Events page, I was greeted with the poster of a shadowed figure surrounded by some of the other protagonists, as well as a staggering 4-hour and 12-minute runtime. As with a lot of movies, I looked it up on Google and just read a little about it. I also had a look at the trailer, and was excited to say the least. However, something I noticed was that the movie title was shown not 1, not 2, not 3, but a whopping 4 times throughout it. This film was already setting a pretty high bar. Our scheduled showing was nearing closer and closer. Then came the big day, August 11th. We walked in out of the blazing summer sun and sat down. We found ourselves greeted with a small interview where the star of the movie, Peter O'Toole, who also happens to be the voice of Anton Ego in Ratatouille, recalled stories of the production of Lawrence. I suppose that's what added a few extra minutes to the screening. Even so, it still would have been the longest movie I'd ever seen. The feature that originally held that honor was The Sound of Music at 3 hours, so this was quite a stretch. This was the 3rd theatrical re-release I'd been to. Prior, there would be up to 6 to 10 people roughly in each showing, but there were people in easily half the theater seats, and this was a pretty big cinema as well. Soon enough, the lights dimmed. And the first thing I heard was that distinct drum beat. An elaborate soundtrack suite was heard with a number of different themes that would appear in the movie. It starts off at a British headquarters facility where we meet a young lieutenant by the name of T.E. Lawrence. He is given orders to assist the Arab Bureau in, well, Arabia. After he has another brief talk with Mr. Dryden, we get what may be the best cut in cinema.
It's going to be fun.
It is recognized that you have a funny sense of fun.
Tell me that isn't cool. That thunderous crash of music truly hits differently. There were also countless other sequences of our characters riding through the desert, whether shadowed by towering mountains or traversing vast plains. The sheer scale of this movie makes you feel like you're really there. Lawrence is meant to meet Colonel Brighton as he makes his way through this huge canyon. He's called by the latter and, naturally, looks around. We see just a teeny tiny speck emerge. Instead of zooming in, the camera keeps Brighton obscured by distance, so you have to look around the screen to find him. Exactly what Lawrence would be doing. You're probably watching this video on a computer or whatever device you're using right now. But trust me, sitting in front of a large theater screen makes these locations ginormous. There was also a fair amount of humor. Lawrence gives Taffus his pistol, a recurring prop throughout the film. The lieutenant is offered Bedo food by his traveling partner as thanks. Not wanting to be rude, he takes a bite. The slight chuckles in the theater could tell very easily that he wasn't enjoying it, but it wasn't an exaggerated choke or comical facial expression that makes it funny, but rather the lack thereof. There were a few subtle laughs here and there, but the audience, myself included, almost roared at this one line.
They take from a great box they have.
In Aqaba.
In Aqaba?
Where else?
You trouble me like women.
It's a very witty remark, of course, but I think it's also the random nature of it. Really, though, there's so many good lines sprinkled in this picture, comedic or otherwise.
Well, I can't make out whether you're bloody bad-mannered or just half-witted.
I have the same problem, sir.
Shut up.
Yes, sir.
1 shilling every week.
That is fair.
each.
No, that is too much.
Have you no fear, English?
My fear is my concern.
And a man who tells lies, like me, merely hides the truth. But a man who tells half lies has forgotten where he put it.
Truly, for some men, nothing is written unless they write it.
I believe I should also talk about the action, because there's a lot of action in this movie. Most of it consists of horses and camels stampeding through a war zone, which I'll talk about in a moment. Lawrence and his army began blowing up Turkish trains. Right after the blast, it comes off the rails and slides into the dirt. You can tell this is a humongous steam engine from the amount of smoke it produces as it plunges off the embankment. Still not convinced? Well, here's a crash with actual model trains. Plus, just look at the size of the wrecked locomotive compared to the actors. There's a good number of scenes of Arabs riding through huge landscapes, like the rush to Aqaba, the claiming of Turkish horses, approaching the Nefud Desert, departing for Damascus, entering Auda's camp, exiting Auda's camp. It just goes on and on. There's also, of course, the soaring music, composed by the one and only Maurice Jarre, who also did John Frankenheimer's The Train a couple years later. I have a video on that one in the corner. As it so happens, he ended up having only 6 weeks to score the entire film, and it's safe to say he made good use of it. As I mentioned before, we have our big, large, epic orchestral pieces, which sound amazing, but there's one scene that stuck out to me, where drums and other instruments are used to convey the thrashing heat of the sun. During the intermission, we went out to get some hot dogs real quick. While in line, we talked of a few things regarding the movie. I brought up how there was something intimidating about Peter O'Toole's presence as Lawrence that I just couldn't put my finger on. I think what my buddy said was what I'd been getting at. Pete has these piercing blue eyes that always stick out among everything else, especially in settings that aren't saturated in other colors. In view of my use of the word theater in this video's title, I should clarify that I have not been to many musicals or stage plays in general. I am talking about cinema. By now you may be wondering why I keep emphasizing the experience of watching this film in a theater. Why should I wait for another re-release or an airing on television when I can just watch it on my phone? Well, the movie has this epic scale to it through its magnificent panoramic shots of the desert and other locations. It is indescribable watching this on a projection well over 4 times my height. I mean, look at this! This picture was meant for the big screen. Of course, it's not all about spectacle. The acting is excellent with some of the most perfect casting I've ever seen. This is also accompanied by a very well-written story based on the real life of T.E. Lawrence, and the breathtaking score, which only adds to the immersion. I can't even go a week without getting some part of the soundtrack stuck in my head. It's that good. I've been to the theaters quite a few times throughout my life, especially in 2024, and I don't think I can recall seeing a movie there that has topped Lawrence of Arabia. Director David Lean could have just taken the easy way out, filming everything on sound stages and miniature models, and still likely making a few good bucks off it. But instead, he and the crew decided to go all out in crafting one of the most beautiful and stunning masterpieces in cinema. I can't put into words how much of a miracle of a motion picture this is. I mean, it's Steven Spielberg's favorite movie, for crying out loud.
Here's what happened today. They could make Lawrence of Arabia today digitally by combining digital effects with live action effects. But in a sense, that's like going to Victoria Falls. And instead of taking the National Geographic Hasselblads to photograph the falls, you say, you know, we don't have to send a photographer to Victoria Falls. Let's digitize Victoria Falls. They'll never tell the difference. Well, people can tell the difference. They know a real wave from a digital wave, a real twister from a digital twister. People know this. And I think that Lawrence today would probably cost about $285 million to make in today's money. And to do it digitally would be a tremendous sin, because what makes that film, unlike any film that can be made again, is that it was done naturally. with the elements of light and sound and maybe the greatest screenplay ever written for the motion picture medium.
It goes without saying that I'm a pretty big fan of this movie. From the cinematography to the outstanding editing, there are not many things I would do differently. If you're planning on watching this film, please do so on a nice, good quality TV, if you're able to, of course. Or better yet, the opportunity for another theatrical re-release may present itself in your area, but don't take my word for it. Find out for yourself, you will not regret it. I know I don't.